It was a Friday night in late September when I was 15, and the air was just starting to turn cold. My parents were out to dinner with friends and wouldn't be back until late, leaving me with the house to myself. My best friend and neighbor, Chris, who was the same age and lived across the street, came over. Usually, we hung out in my basement, playing games or watching movies, but that night we were bored. Eventually, Chris suggested playing hide and seek. It sounded silly, but we had played it with a group before, and it had been fun. Our house was small, but had many potential hiding spots, especially in the dark. To enhance the spookiness, we turned off most lights, leaving only the kitchen light on. The rules were straightforward. No going outside, no attic, no crawl space. The basement, bedrooms, closets, and under furniture were all fair game. Chris wanted to hide first, so I stood in the living room, eyes covered, and counted to 50. I heard him run at first, then silence. Finishing my count, I announced my approach. I began my search in the kitchen, as it was nearby, but there were no good hiding places. I checked behind the basement door, then down the hall. The bathroom was empty. The closet near the front door yielded nothing. I went upstairs, the floorboards creaking underfoot, every tiny sound making me jumpy. I checked my parents' bedroom first, peeking under the bed and behind the dresser. No one. Then I moved to my room. It was messy, but not messy enough for Chris to hide, though I still checked the closet and under the desk. Nothing. That left the guest room at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, expecting him to leap out and scare me, but the room was dark and silent. I stepped inside and scanned around, bending down to look under the bed, finding nothing. The closet door was also empty. At that point, I suspected he might be in the basement, so I headed back downstairs. I searched behind the laundry machines and in the storage area under the stairs. Just as I was about to give up, I finally found him curled up behind some boxes. He laughed and asked how long it had taken me. I told him it felt like forever. Then it was my turn to hide. Chris counted, and I ran upstairs, sliding under the guest bed and pulling the bedsskirt down for cover. My heart pounded as I lay there in the dark. A few minutes later, I heard him come upstairs, his footsteps slow and heavy. He opened the bathroom door first, then entered my parents' room. After a while, his footsteps approached the guest room. I could hear his breathing as he stepped inside. He paused near the bed. I held my breath. His shoes shuffled on the carpet. Then silence. A long silence. I thought he had discovered me and was about to pull up the bedskirt. But instead, he walked out. I lay there for a few more minutes, waiting for him to announce that I had won, but the house remained too quiet. Finally, I crawled out. I went downstairs, expecting to find him on the couch, but he wasn't there. I called out that the game was over. A voice from the basement said he was down there. I thought he was messing with me. I walked to the basement door, opened it, and shouted down the stairs. He shouted back that he was still looking for me and asked where I was hiding. That made my stomach clench. I told him I was out now, standing in the kitchen. A second later, I heard him coming up the stairs. He stepped into the light, looking confused. He asked how I had gotten upstairs so fast. I explained I'd been under the guest bed the whole time. He frowned, saying he could have sworn he checked that room and heard someone moving inside. He even thought he heard breathing. I insisted I had stayed perfectly still. We argued a bit, then shrugged it off. We played another round, but I felt uneasy the whole time. Every creak in the house made me jump. At one point, while I was counting, I thought I heard something upstairs, like a soft thud. But when I searched, it was empty. I found Chris in the laundry room. We continued playing until we were both tired. Then we sat on the couch in the living room and turned the TV back on. That's when we both froze. From upstairs came a loud bump, like something heavy falling. Chris asked if it was my parents. I reminded him they were still gone. The hair on my arms stood up. We sat there waiting, but the house went silent again. Chris suggested maybe something had slid off a shelf. I wanted to believe that, but then, as we sat listening, we both clearly heard it. A slow creak of floorboards, the sound of someone walking down the hall upstairs. We stared at each other, neither of us moving. Then I whispered that maybe we should check. Chris shook his head, saying, "No way." But if someone had broken in, we couldn't just sit there. I told him to stay behind me and grabbed the fireplace poker from beside the couch. We crept toward the stairs. The house was so quiet, I could hear my own breathing. The steps groaned under our weight. When we reached the top, I pointed toward the guest room. The door was closed now. I knew for a fact I had left it cracked open. We stood there, frozen. Then, from behind the door, came a sound. A slow, dragging noise, like fabric sliding across the carpet. Chris whispered that we should leave. I wanted to, but curiosity and fear kept me in place. I raised the poker and reached for the knob. When I tell you my hands were shaking, I'm not just saying that to be dramatic for the story. I pushed the door open fast. The room was dark, but the shapes of the bed and dresser were visible. Nobody was there. The closet door stood half open. I moved closer as Chris stayed in the doorway. I yanked the closet door open. Inside was nothing but coats and boxes. We both let out shaky laughs, pretending it was all in our heads. But then, just as we turned to leave, we heard another sound. This time it wasn't upstairs, it was downstairs, the sound of the front door opening and closing. We froze again. Chris whispered that someone was in the house. I felt my stomach drop. We ran down the hall and crouched in my room with the lights off. I held the poker tight. We listened, and at first there was nothing. Then there were faint footsteps on the first floor. I wanted to call the police, but my phone was on the couch where we had been sitting. I whispered that maybe we could sneak out the window, but it was too small. The only way out was down the hall, past the stairs. The footsteps moved closer. We heard the basement door open. Then the steps went down, one by one. We both exhaled in relief. Whoever it was had gone into the basement, so we took that time to run. We sprinted down the stairs, through the kitchen, and out the back door into the yard. We didn't stop until we reached Chris's house across the street. His parents were home, and when we told them what happened, they called the police. The officers searched my house from top to bottom. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry or anyone hiding in the basement. They told us it was probably just the house settling, or our imagination running wild while we played. But Chris and I both knew what we heard. We knew someone had been inside. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep well. Every creak made me think someone was in the hallway. That was the last time I ever played hide and seek. We're too old for it anyway. Chris and I never talked much about it again, but sometimes when we look at each other, I can tell we're both remembering that night. The night hide and seek turned into something else. Even now, years later, I still think about the sound of the closet door, the dragging noise in the carpet, and the footsteps on the first floor. We never found out who it was. Maybe a burglar who realized we were still home. Maybe someone who slipped out when we ran. All I know is that playing hide and seek that night showed us just how scary it is to realize you aren't alone in your own house. I grew up in a neighborhood that bordered a stretch of woods. Houses lined one side of the street, and behind them there were miles of trees. When I was younger, a group of us kids from the street used to play together almost every weekend. In the summer, we stayed out late into the night, sometimes until our parents yelled for us to come home. One of our favorite games was hide and seek. We usually played in the backyards and at the edge of the woods. It was fun during the day, but at night it was different. The trees swallowed up the light, and everything looked the same no matter where you were. That's what made it scary. And that's what made it fun. The last time I ever played hide and seek in those woods was when I was 14. It was August, hot and humid, even at night. There were 5 of us: me, my friend Tyler, his little brother Matt, and 2 kids from down the street, Jason and Eric. We all decided to play outside because it felt cooler than sitting in someone's basement. The rule was simple. You could hide anywhere in the backyards or in the woods, but you had to stay close enough to hear when the seeker called the round over. Jason volunteered to be it first. The rest of us ran off. I went into the woods with Tyler. We split up once we passed the first row of trees. I crouched behind a fallen log, my heart beating hard, even though it was just a game. I could hear Jason shouting numbers back in the yard, his voice echoing through the night. When he finished, everything went quiet. Crickets buzzed around me, and the leaves rustled in the wind. I stayed low and still. After a while, I heard footsteps in the leaves. They were moving between the trees. I thought it was Jason. I held my breath and waited for him to pass. The footsteps stopped not far from me. Whoever it was stood there. I waited for them to call out or move again, but silence persisted. A shiver ran down my spine. I was on the verge of whispering to ask who was there, but then the rules of the game flashed through my mind. Giving myself away meant losing. So I remained absolutely still. Finally, the footsteps resumed, rustling through the fallen leaves, moving deeper into the woods. I listened intently until the sounds faded completely. Peering over the log, I found the darkness too profound to discern anything clearly. The moonlight merely illuminated the treetops. I stayed hidden for several more minutes before my patience wore thin. I crawled out and began to cautiously make my way back towards the yards. As I walked, I heard Jason's voice announcing the end of the round and calling everyone to come out. I hastened my pace and found the others already gathered in the yard. Jason had located Tyler and Eric, but not me or Matt. A minute later, Matt burst from the woods, covered in dirt, laughing that no one could have found him. I recounted how I had been behind the log and nearly caught when Jason walked right past me. But Jason looked baffled. He claimed he never ventured that deep into the woods, only circling near the first line of trees before finding Tyler crouched by a fence. My eyes narrowed in confusion, and I asked who then had passed by me, but everyone simply shrugged. We dismissed it and continued our game. In the subsequent round, I was the seeker. I loudly counted against a tree while the others dispersed. Upon finishing, I first scoured the yards. I discovered Eric concealed behind a shed and Tyler amidst the bushes. Then I proceeded into the woods to search for Jason and Matt. The woods were quiet, save for the chirping of insects. My flashlight beam cut through the trees. I listened carefully, attempting to detect any movement. After a while, I spotted Matt hunched near a tree trunk. I shouted that I had him, and he ran back, chuckling. That left Jason. I delved deeper, calling out that I was approaching. That's when the sound returned. The footsteps, slow and heavy, moving in the darkness, coming from just ahead of me. I directed my flashlight beam that way, but the trees were dense. I advanced cautiously, striving to be silent. The footsteps ceased. I waited. By now, I confess, I was growing a little anxious. Then I heard Jason's voice from behind me, announcing the round was over. I spun around. He was already heading back to the yard. Confused, I asked if he had just been in front of me. He replied, "No, he had been hiding closer to the house the entire time." My stomach clenched. Twice now, I had heard someone moving through the woods who wasn't one of us. I rationalized that it was probably an animal, but the steps had sounded human. Too heavy for a raccoon, a fox, or even a deer. We played a few more rounds. Each time I hid, I couldn't shake the sensation that another presence was out there. I kept catching faint noises in the trees, branches snapping, leaves crunching. At one point, I even thought I saw a shadow flit between the trees, but when I shone my flashlight, it vanished. The others didn't notice anything. They just continued laughing and running. I tried to act normal, but a nervous knot tightened in my gut. During the final round of the night, Jason again opted to hide in the woods. We all split up as before. Unwilling to go too far, I stayed near the edge, crouching low in the tall grass. I could faintly see the porch lights glowing through the trees. I heard Jason's distant voice counting. When he finished, silence once again descended. After a few minutes, I heard something that froze me in place. Whispering, a low voice, too soft to distinguish the words, but it was close. My entire body tensed. I cautiously peered over the grass, but the woods appeared empty. I listened intently, but the whispering had stopped. A moment later, I heard footsteps again. They moved past me and deeper into the trees. I lay there trembling. That's when Jason called out that the game was over. Everyone else emerged, laughing and dusting dirt from themselves. I walked back slowly, my heart still racing. I told them I had heard someone whispering, but they merely laughed and accused me of trying to scare them. I didn't argue, but I knew what I had heard. We sat in Tyler's yard afterward, drinking soda and chatting. That was when Matt asked if anyone else had noticed the man. We all stopped and stared at him. He recounted that while hiding, he thought he saw a tall man standing in the woods. He said the man didn't move, just stood there watching. Jason told him he was crazy. Eric laughed it off, but I felt sick because I believed him. We ended the night shortly after, and everyone went home. That night, I lay in bed, staring at my ceiling, unable to sleep. The whispering played on repeat in my head, along with the slow crunch of footsteps in the leaves. I never played hide-and-seek in the woods again. Even now, years later, whenever I hear leaves crunch underfoot in the dark, my thoughts drift back to that night. I recall the man Matt claimed to have seen, the footsteps that weren't Jason's, and the whisper I still cannot explain. Perhaps it was a stranger passing through, or maybe someone who lived out there. All I know is that when you hide in the dark woods, you never truly know who else is hiding with you. It was a scorching hot Saturday afternoon last July. I was 14 years old at the time and resided in the rural part of Pennsylvania. My backyard was expansive, featuring acres of open grass, trees, and an old storage shed at the perimeter. My friends and I spent almost every summer day out there. On that particular day, it was me, Ryan, Josh, and Adam. We were just fooling around, playing basketball on the hoop my dad had installed near the garage. After about an hour, we were all exhausted, sitting on the grass, sweaty and hydrating. That's when we noticed a kid we didn't recognize, approaching from the dirt road that ran past my house. He looked about 16, older and taller than us. He had somewhat messy black hair and wore a gray shirt and jeans despite the heat. We all ceased our conversation the moment we became aware of him. He walked right up, as if he already knew us. He inquired if we wanted to even out the teams and play 3-on-3. None of us responded immediately. Finally, Adam asked who he was. The kid stated his name was Keith. He explained that he lived just up the road and had been walking through the woods when he noticed us. We exchanged glances amongst ourselves. I've lived here my entire life and had never seen this kid before. Neither had my friends, but he seemed normal enough, I suppose. Ben asked him if he wanted to play basketball. Keith shook his head and proposed we play manhunt instead, suggesting my yard was perfect for it due to the multitude of hiding spots. At that moment, I don't think any of us gave that comment a second thought. But in hindsight, it should have been a red flag. How would this kid know anything about my property? We all agreed to play. It sounded more engaging than standing around in the heat. We divided into 2 teams. Keith immediately volunteered to be on the hunting team first, stating he loved being the seeker. So, it was Keith, Adam, and Josh hunting, and me, Ryan, and Ben hiding. Adam kicked a soccer ball to signal the start. We dashed into the yard, while the hunters covered their eyes and counted. Ryan sprinted towards the tree line, then veered towards the side of the garage. I, on the other hand, didn't want to hide in the woods just yet, so I slipped into the storage shed. It perpetually had the scent of gasoline and old wood. I found a stack of folded tarps in the corner, climbed under one, and lay still. I remained there for at least 10 minutes, though it felt like an eternity. No one came. I began to think the hunters might have given up. But then, the shed door creaked open. The tarp was swiftly yanked off me. I guess it was an obvious hiding spot. I looked up to Adam's smiling face. We both walked back to the patio. A few minutes later, Ben appeared, having also been caught. Eventually, Adam and Josh returned. We all stood around drinking water, but Keith was nowhere to be found. Initially, no one spoke. Then, Josh inquired about Keith's whereabouts. None of us knew. We waited another 10 minutes, expecting him to reappear any second, but he never did. Adam finally shrugged and remarked that perhaps he was just some peculiar kid, and left. The rest of us concurred, even though it felt odd that he would simply vanish without a word. When the others departed around sunset, I went inside. That's when I noticed something peculiar near my bedroom window. On the grass was a piece of rope. It was weathered and dirty, as if it had been outside for months. But I was certain it hadn't been there earlier. I picked it up and tossed it aside, but it lingered in my thoughts. My initial thought was Keith. I told myself I was overthinking, but later that evening, I couldn't stop wondering if he'd slipped inside the house while we were preoccupied. My dad usually leaves one of the side doors unlocked during the day. I went room by room, checking closets and under beds. Nothing. That night, I prepared for bed around 11 o'clock. I lay there for perhaps an hour, scrolling on my phone, when I heard something. Soft footsteps outside my door. I froze. My dad occasionally gets up at night to use the bathroom, but he always coughs or clears his throat. This was quiet. Too quiet. I called out for my dad. No answer. I sat up, my pulse pounding. The footsteps stopped directly outside my door. I finally got up and locked it. I stood there, staring at the handle, waiting. After about 30 seconds, I heard the front door shut, the sound reverberating through the entire house. I didn't waste a second. I ran to my dad's room and shook him awake. He groggily sat up while I explained what I had heard. He didn't doubt me. He grabbed the shotgun from under his bed and instructed me to stay close. We searched the entire house together, every closet, the basement, the garage. He even went outside and walked the property with a flashlight, but he didn't find anything. We locked every door and window after that. The following day, I shared my experience with my friends, who dismissed it with laughter, suggesting Keith was likely just an eccentric stranger passing through. However, Ryan confessed he also found Keith peculiar, mentioning that he barely spoke during the game, instead just observing everyone intently. That night, sleep eluded me. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, a scratching noise emanating from my bedroom window jolted me awake. I lay motionless, fixing my gaze on the blinds. The scratching was deliberate and slow, reminiscent of something being dragged across the glass, like a stick or a nail. Despite my reluctance, an irresistible urge compelled me to look. Cautiously, I pried open a blind, just enough to create a slender gap. On the other side, a shadowy figure stood. I couldn't